that American spirit of self-reliance was under attack in this case by Alvin Bragg, but of course now has thankfully been reaffirmed by the jury. And it's such an American thing, which is to say we do things for ourselves. We don't wait around for the government to do something. Hi everyone, welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. We have a big announcement for you in this week's episode. Stay tuned for that. We also have some great California updates for you with our friend Jen Horn. And because it's the holidays and they are fast approaching, we talk a little bit about her plans and what my plans are going to be. But I do want to start with a very, very important piece of news that we've just heard, just as I'm coming on to tape this. It's Monday, December the 9th, and we have had a verdict in the trial in New York of Daniel Penny. To me, this is such incredibly, not just good news, but important news, because it affirms something that is so central to everything we hold dear in this country. You may have heard by now, I'm sure you have by the time you listen to this or you're watching this, he was acquitted on the lower charge. I mean, the story of this case, as you know, is that he intervened to prevent what could have been an absolutely catastrophic situation. This violent, mentally unstable, homeless person on a New York subway threatening other passengers. He intervened, physically restrained him. The guy died subsequently, not then and there, but subsequently. And then it unfolded. And of course, it was the Good Samaritan, the hero who protected people, who was prosecuted. The trial that was just going on. At the end of last week, the judge dismissed the higher charge. And then today, the jury acquitted him of the lower charge. So he's cleared. Now, of course, that's not the end of it, because his whole life has been turned upside down. We hear that there's a civil prosecution going on here and so on and so forth. So, he's been living this for a year, and all because he did the right thing. And this is the central point I wanted to make and take it in a direction that I particularly want to capture for you as a new American. Because it's not just the fact that this prosecution was brought by Alvin Bragg. Remember, Alvin Bragg, the disgraceful Soros-backed far-left extremist, who's the DA in Manhattan, who, of course, brought that totally bogus and spurious case against Donald Trump that just made a mockery of our whole justice system. So this far-left political activist, yet again, showing how completely unmoored from our basic principles and values the far left is these days in America. So he brings this case which, inverts everything that we hold dear, which is that, and captures this sense, and I talk about this later on as well in the show about, what's happening in relation to sanctuary cities in California and across the country, which is that increasingly it feels as if the way things are set up, if you do the right thing, you're punished, and if you do the wrong thing, you're rewarded. And that you just feel that right across society in so many different areas of policy. But this was such a vivid and egregious example of that. Here is someone who steps up to protect people, to protect strangers from harm, and puts himself at risk. He didn't know whether or not this person was armed or how he might respond. He just did it instinctively to protect his neighbors, his fellow citizens. And of course, he should have been recognized as a hero for that. But in our crazy, distorted, upside down, far left worldview that is now far too prevalent in this country, he's the one that's punished and hounded. Now, thankfully, the jury saw through it. So that's fantastic. That is great news. But it's a very, very important case because it shows us what's at stake when you put these far left people in and how society can collapse so quickly because of the point that everyone was making, which is that if this is how it's going to be, that if you step up and do the right thing, you're the one that gets punished, then no one's going to step up and do the right thing. It's sending exactly the wrong kind of message. But because people can see it so clearly in this case, it's important to stop on that and understand that principle, that the incentives that we send as a society through the way we structure our whole structure our systems in whatever area, whether that's in education or crime or business or whatever, the incentives that the system transmits are the things that will shape how life operates in this country. And sadly, in so many areas, it's the bad behavior that gets rewarded. But there's a deeper point here, that I particularly feel as someone who loves this country and really appreciates what makes it special. And it's that American spirit of self-reliance that I think was under attack in this case by Alvin Bragg, but of course now has thankfully been reaffirmed by the jury. And it's such an American thing, which is to say, we do things for ourselves. We don't wait around for the government to do something. And so in this particular case, we don't, call the police, whatever. But I saw one of the law enforcement people making the point that in a situation like this, yes, it's fine. You can trust the police. They'll be there in minutes when every second counts. And that's the point. There just isn't time. You've got to act in the moment. You can't rely on the authorities and the police and the government. They can't be everywhere at once. And so that goes very deep into how we think about America, I think. It's not just in this particular case and in the area of law enforcement. It's this idea that we don't wait around for the government to do things. We organize, we stand up, we do things for ourselves, we act. That is the American way. And I think it's such a vital principle of American life, and it is the key to our success in so many areas, not just in building this incredible country across this continent, but just in the fact that we the world's number one economy because we have that spirit of can do, of enterprise, of boldness, of let's just get it done. It's the same spirit that this guy showed on the subway to stand up and just act in the moment. It's exactly the same spirit, the can-do spirit that has Elon Musk building reusable rockets that can just be caught by a pair of what do you call them? Chopsticks, as we saw the other week. That incredible boldness of just getting on with it and exploring and pushing the boundaries and standing up for yourself. That is what was at stake here. It's so deeply American, this idea of self-reliance, that we don't just wait around for the government. And so much of what we've seen in the past few years has been undermining that. This idea that, and you see it in every area, you see it with parents and their children, that it's the government that's telling them how to raise their children, the schools, and now the schools, parents aren't even informed of key changes that go on in their kids' lives because the government knows best and the government's going to take charge and the government determines how to raise your kids and they'll decide and you have no right to decide. Of course, we saw it in the pandemic. You see it in the economy with this kind of incredible over-regulation of everything, bossing everyone around, bossing businesses around, telling them, micromanaging them the whole time. This growing assault on the spirit of self-reliance. I think it's a very, very deep thing. And actually, to think about it in a positive way, we just saw the American spirit of self-reliance reaffirmed. We saw it reaffirmed in this particular case in New York, and that's why it's such an amazing verdict and such great news for our country. And I hope the message it sends is to encourage people to say, yeah, if you do step up and if you do take the initiative and have the courage to protect people, we're with you. We're on your side. We're not on the side of the naysayers and the people who are doing the wrong thing. We're on the side of the people who do the right thing. But of course, it was affirmed right across the board with the election result, because that's the spirit that Trump embodies as a builder himself. That American spirit, the can-do spirit. One of my favorite, you saw during the campaign, and he'd do the rallies, and they'd put different messages up, big slogans in the arenas where he would speak and so on. They're obviously the campaign thinking of different messages at different times. But towards the end, there was this phrase that I loved. He didn't say it so much. It wasn't like it didn't become a famous phrase that he would say, but it was there at a lot of the events. Towards the end, it was dream big. And I thought, yes, that's it. That is what we need to get back to. Dream big, go for it, do great things. That is America. We don't wait around for someone else to do it. We do it ourselves, and that's how greatness is achieved. And so I think this verdict says something very, very deep about our country and would have done in a very negative sense if it had gone the other way. And I'm just so thankful that it went the right way. And it's something I hope that we can build on and take forward and remember, because it is so important to everything that we hold dear in this country. All right, I promised you a announcement And here it is. It's to do with California. I know there's been some speculation about my intentions with respect to California. There's no announcement on that front before you get the wrong idea. But a really, really exciting thing that I'm incredibly proud to share with you is the announcement that I'm going to be publishing my next book. It's going to be out next year. And here it is. It's called Califailure: Reversing the Ruin of America's Worst Run State. Califailure. Very proud of this. Been working on it for quite a while now. And the thing I just wanted to say about it is clearly, well, there's two things. First of all, yes, it's, as the title suggests, and it is very much about identifying what's gone wrong in California and why. I'll get to that in a second. But the first thing I wanted to say, it's not just negative, because part two of this book, so part one is California, the overall title is Califailure, and part one is Califailure, and I'll get to that in a second. But part two is called Califuture. And Califuture lays out a positive vision for how we turn things around in California. Of course, many of you will have followed my work with Golden Together, the policy organization I set up, a year and a half ago or so, and we've been publishing policy papers. And some of the ideas in those policy papers are also here in this book, in part two, in Califuture. But there's a bunch of other stuff as well, including some really, I let myself go a bit in terms of thinking of the real possibilities for California if we have the right kind of policies in place that enable just the same kind of can-do spirit that I was just talking about, which I think in a way California represents better than anywhere else in America, or should do at least. The best version of California represents everything that is great and magnificent about America, particularly that amazing sense of purpose and ambition and boldness and creativity and energy and innovation and entrepreneurialism, all of that. That's captured in part two of this book, Califuture. And I think you'll really enjoy it. And the second point, the part one, Califailure, it doesn't just list everything that's gone wrong. We all know that, particularly those of us, if you're watching or listening to this and you live in California, of course, you don't need a reminder of exactly why it's a total disaster, this policy agenda that's been pursued. The real point of this book is not just to sort of go on and on about all the things we already know. It's to try and explain why and how it happened. How did we get to this point where California is just the worst out of all 50 states on so many different things? We have the highest rate of poverty. For much of this year, we had the highest unemployment. We have the highest taxes, the highest cost for pretty much every essential in life, whether that's electricity and water and gas, of course, for cars, but also the highest housing costs. We have the worst business climate in America. We've had the worst business climate for 10 years in a row, on and on so many areas. We're just the bottom, where, of course, we should be at the top. California should be the best of America. There's this phrase I use. If you've heard me speak on the road in California, you've heard me say this many, many times. It's a phrase I heard about our beautiful state that captures where I think it should be. And the phrase is, California means to America what America means to the world. We should be the best of America, the representation of everything that's good in America, but it's gone so far off track, we're now the worst. And I'm trying to explain in this book how and why that happened. Of course, you could say, well, it's the Democrats. Yes, that's true. And we do go into some of the, if you like, the structural explanations of how you've ended up with this supermajority, how the Democrats have been able to take control. And it goes right back to 1968 with some decisions that were made in terms of the unions and public sector collective bargaining and all of that entrenched the power of the unions and the Democrats. So we go into all the history of how we ended up in this one-party state. But it's more than that. It's not enough just to say Democrats, because you have Democrats in other states, and they haven't done this crazy far-left extremism that we've seen in California. And so the way this book is structured, the kind of theme really, is to understand the pathologies. What are the components of this far-left ideology? What are the ways in which they've done this to our beautiful state? And so each chapter is not a specific issue like here's the crime chapter and here's education. It's looking at the way that this has happened and the different pathologies. That's the word that I use. And for example, there's a massive component of elitism in what's gone wrong. The way that they've done things that make the elites feel virtuous, but really crush working people. There's a phrase I use in this book called compassionism, where it's not compassion, which is a good thing. Compassionism is an ideological desire to look like you're being compassionate, but actually it's the opposite. It's cruel and destructive. For example, letting people sleep on the street, live on the street if they're mentally ill drug addicts. That is not compassion. That is actually cruelty. But compassionism turns it into something noble. Um, Obviously, so much of the policy agenda that we see now in California that's causing so much pain and destruction and hurting families and businesses and everyone's quality of life and their cost of living is this climate extremism. And so that's an ideology as well. And I call it climatism. It's not just climate and environmentalism and trying to protect our environment. It's gone way beyond that. And so we go through all these different things. There's also narcissism, socialism, Maoism, cronyism, and so on. We go through all the different components of this far left ideology and then try and fit it all together. So I think it's a really, I would say this, I wrote it, but I'm very proud of this book. I think it's great. I think you'll enjoy it. It's out next year, but you can pre-order it now, as I say. So please go and do that, because if you pre-order a copy, that really helps us get going in a strong way when we launch the book next year. So it's called Califailure, Reversing the Ruin of America's Worst Run State. Please go to Amazon and wherever you get your books and pre-order your copy now. All right, joining us now for California Corner is our friend Jen Horn, AM 870, The Morning Answer. You got to listen to her, especially Friday mornings when I'm there, when I can, get my alarm clock to work properly. Anyway, it's great to see you, Jen. I know we're going to talk about some amazing California stories, in particular, the kind of insanity over sanctuary cities. We'll get to that in a second, but I want to talk about the weekend that I just had, because you will understand this very, very well. Some people may have seen some pictures that I've been posting on X about my weekend in Florida, focused around Charlie Kirk's amazing winter gala for Turning Point. And you know Charlie so well. He's a great friend. He's fantastic. But the thing that I really wanted to talk to you about and tell everyone about was just the incredible energy and the scale of what Charlie has built with Turning Point that was really evident to me. I mean, I've known Charlie for years. I put him on my show, right from day one, pretty much. So, of course, I've followed Turning Point. But this is the first time I've been to one of these big events. It was just absolutely amazing. And in fact, there were two things that really stood out to me. First of all, the scale of what he's built, the different operations, and the impact that Turning Point is having, particularly with the youth vote, which has just completely flipped around in this election to support President Trump. Amazing, amazing numbers. And he's just been such a sort of key part of all of that, and Turning Point and all the thousands and thousands of people that are working and volunteering with Turning Point. But the other thing that I felt very strongly, and this is something I think you'll really relate to, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, was particularly the evening event, which was, it's a fundraiser. You got a lot of wealthy people there. They're giving money to Charlie and Turning Point. But the atmosphere, the feeling there, it was, it was very, it's at Mar-a-Lago, and everyone there loves President Trump. You could say it's a very MAGA crowd. Let's use that term. But the thing that really stood out to me was the warmth of it all, the emotional depth of it. And it really felt, I know thousands of people, it felt like a family coming together. It was really interesting to me, just the warmth and the emotional human aspect of it all. It was really striking.
It's really funny, Steve, because I was not quite at Mar-a-Lago. I was at the Westlake Yacht Club actually just yesterday, and there was a MAGA Christmas party there. And that same thing struck me. It's just this warmth and this happiness and this sense of optimism, I think, that we have not felt in such a long time. And I think it's because, and I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason. Now, did we all feel terrible and bitter and awful about the election of 2020? Yes. But for some reason, I think that 4 years needed to happen to wake people up about some of the stuff that the left has been pushing on us that just wasn't working, and that they were lying about, and that people were kind of being spoon-fed by the mainstream news media. There was a lot of awakening that was going on over the last 4 years, and I think what you felt at Mar-a-Lago is what I felt at this MAGA Christmas gathering the other day, and that is that people really did the work to get President Trump elected this time.
Mhm,
People really believe in the message of MAGA, and I
mhm.
think I think that same thing happens in our state of California too. People wanna make California great again. We're not in the mood to run anymore, and I think
Yes.
people are feeling that if we work, we actually see results, and I think there's just great sense of optimism and unity and happiness, and I think it's contagious whether you're at Mar-a-Lago or you're at a block party down the street. I really do think people are feeling that, and I think because we were so involved in the game, and certainly Turning Point was so involved with this election win,
Mhm.
people feel personally connected to
Yes.
President Trump and personally connected to MAGA and making the country successful again, that we're all in this, and that does make us family, I think. So I really
Yeah.
think that you're picking up on something that I feel too. It's
Yeah.
definitely there.
It's interesting, and I think also the other part of it that I feel, and I don't quite have the words to capture it. You'll maybe you can sort of do it for me. There's something about the fact that particularly when you have obviously now, right, and in the run up to the election and clearly since, you've got all sorts of people flocking to President Trump's side, um, both here, and around the world. Macron and all the world leaders.
Yeah.
He would have been there at the Turning Point thing if he hadn't got that invitation to go to Paris for the opening of Notre Dame. Of course, that was a great thing for him to do. We were very proud of that. But actually, it felt very much to me like the people who were there at Mar-a-Lago, and I'm sure at your event too, we were the ones who were there all along.
Mhm.
Um, and the real, in and when it was pretty rough.
Yeah,
Um, and there's a sense of it's vindication is too much. Is
definitely.
almost too intellectual about it. There's just this sense of really sort of pride almost, like, it was difficult often, and here in California, difficult
Well,
to
think about what
to
we were
stick to, but
called,
look what's just happened, and
right?
look at the whole country and the popular vote and the comprehensiveness and clarity of the victory, and we were there. It's a really lovely feeling, actually.
It is, and I think for so long, and I don't think that this is just about President Trump. Actually, people who believed in MAGA or who believed in some of the Republican causes were called a lot of names, and we had our lives significantly changed. Whether it was COVID or whether it was, I go back to the Hunter Biden laptop story. Think about what we learned in the last week. You had Biden pardon his son in such a broad way for a 10-year period, indicating that there is more than the stuff that we know
Yes.
about. The congressional COVID report comes out, and, if you dare question the vaccine or how the federal government was handling things, or the state government in California, you were called a conspiracy theorist. How many of us in California weren't allowed to go into a hospital with our loved ones or send our kids to school or go to a meal at a
Yeah.
restaurant? And so I think what comes with that is that we feel personally tied to the same struggles that President Trump went through, all of those roadblocks. And I think that there's just this feeling of, yes, vindication, but also relief that we
Mhm.
might be back on a different path and that we might be seeing a new light, a new day in our
Yeah.
country and in our state of California.
Yeah, it was just I don't know, I found it very, very moving, the whole thing, and it
Yeah.
just reminded me actually I got an invitation for an event round here in January just after the inauguration, someone who's a big supporter of President Trump's, and it's a sort of party to celebrate the election and the inauguration, and it's after the inauguration. The subject line in the invite, "Are you tired of winning yet?" It says, "Come celebrate Donald J. Trump's historic victory with fellow garbage supporters." And it's just there's a kind of sense of humor and, just there's a kind of I wanna connect it with the Meet the Press interview, which I haven't seen. I didn't watch it, but I've seen clips of it, quite a few clips of with President Trump with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press yesterday. He seemed very mellow, very, very calm, very happy. I don't know, there's this feeling that it's all gonna be okay, and
I
and
know. Isn't that
and
nice?
everything's kind of I don't know, it's really, really interesting, and I have to say it was just such a wonderful thing to be part of. I love Charlie, I've known him for so long, it's so wonderful to see how successful he and Turning Point have been, but this whole crowd, everyone's so hugging and it's just like a really warm and happy occasion that I've never really and also it felt like this really is the heart of the Republican Party now.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the it felt almost like I don't know, it's really special. It was
Yeah, like
very,
a
very
rebirth.
moving.
I
Yeah.
think it's a rebirth, and I think it's an energy, and I definitely feel it too, and I have to just underscore the support that we both have, I know, for Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. I just learned this recently, but apparently Charlie Kirk started Turning Point with $10,000 in his pocket, and
Yeah.
think about where it is today. I mean, this is a testament to Charlie's passion and his foresight and his vision for how we can help change young minds. And it absolutely worked this time around. President Trump did better with young voters than any Republican has done in a very long time. And that's hugely important. And I would say a special shout out to three groups that really I believe, I mean, I think you could talk about what went into the wins for all of us, whether we're talking about local California stuff or President Trump. But there's some really important groups that came together to work, and that is Moms for America, Scott Pressler's group, Early Vote
Mhm.
Action, and Turning Point USA. And I think if we all want to see success in California, we need to start pulling apart what these groups did. You know, on the podcast that I do with Katie Gorka, we
Mhm.
interviewed Tina Deskovich from Moms for America.
Mhm.
And she, with $3 million, was able to take a group of voters, and she did this in Georgia. They focused on Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Now, when I talked to her, they had not gotten their final results in from Arizona or Wisconsin, but in the state of Georgia, they purchased information basically
Mhm.
for low propensity voters who were parents and involved in kind of the process of schooling, but had only voted in 1 or 2 elections over the past 10 years. Their rate of voting was 23%, this list. Moms for America turned that into 93%,
Wow. Wow.
based on targeted marketing, going door to door. This is the same kind of stuff that Turning Point USA did. And what I think that teaches all of us is that voting is personal. When you feel that connection you felt at
Mhm.
Mar-a-Lago, it's because everybody feels like they're on the team and everybody is invested. And I think for candidates to be successful here in California as we want them to be, that's exactly what they're going to have to replicate, is getting everybody to feel a part of something. So it is more than just a vote, it's a movement. And
Yeah.
that's
It's
hugely
exactly.
powerful.
It's a movement and it's a family.
Yeah.
That's the word that I just kept thinking. It was just really, really amazing. And I agree with you. And one of the things I always say about Charlie, I had there was a funny time. I can't remember if we've talked about this. It was a couple of months ago now, actually, during the election, and he had a big event in California, in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
the supporters, and 2 events actually in the same evening. He'd been so kind of out there on campuses and talking and doing what he does, and he literally lost his voice and wasn't able to speak at all, like, couldn't speak, not even whisper. He was, like, writing things down on a pad and stuff.
I
Anyway,
remember that.
I got a call from his team saying, "Charlie can't, he literally's got all these people coming to see him. He can't speak, so would you speak? Could you come and speak for him?
The
Like,
voice.
be the voice, as it were." And, and I did, it was amazing, but the thing I remember saying was, and I say it all the time, and I'll say it again now, which is that the thing that I love about Charlie and Turning Point is it's such a great American entrepreneurial story. Just
Yes.
building, and as someone who started companies myself, it's incredibly hard to start anything and to start and to succeed, and he's achieved, and to scale something. It's really
Mhm.
difficult. And so I really admire the entrepreneurialism of what's happened with Turning Point. It's an amazing, amazing thing. Um,
Absolutely.
all right, let's talk about some California stuff. What have you got?
Oh boy, lots going on around here, Steve. There's let's start with immigration since we were talking about President Trump and you mentioned the Meet the Press interview. I thought President Trump did an incredible job with Christian Welker. He just seems so calm and
Mhm.
focused and reasonable, and just it feels like President Trump right now is just operating in a sweet spot. And
Mhm.
of course he was asked about deportations, and of course he said, "Look, we're going to be prioritizing criminal deportations. That's coming first, but we got to figure something out." He even, and I think this is much to the chagrin of the standard swamp style Republican, even said, we are going to have to consider what to do with dreamers, which, if this is the only country they've known, we may have to be ready to keep them here. And so he's really having some in-depth conversations about what policy is going to look like, what the next 4 years is going to look like. But of course, before you can even think about working something out for dreamers, you have to secure that border to make sure
Yeah.
no one else is coming here. So, a lot's going to be going on. In our state of California, you may have heard that Gavin Newsom last week, the governor, called a special session of the state legislature. And It is such a joke. Bill Essayli, our buddy, the assemblyman from the Inland Empire, walked in with his dark MAGA hat, I guess to make a point, even though you're not supposed to wear a hat in the chamber. But Gavin Newsom came in and said, we've got big bad Trump coming along. I'm paraphrasing, of course, and I need $25 million to fight him. And so here we are once again, Steve, in a state like California that's got a bazillion problems. Yes, that's an official term, and I think it's an official number. And Gavin Newsom is more concerned about bringing in $25 million so that or failing financially failing state to try to fight Trump for Rob Bonta so that the two of them can have this slush fund of sorts to go after President Trump. And he's going to get it and he's got the money. But then there's some people who are worried in local law enforcement that if the lawsuits are going to start flying from Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta, the attorney general, what might happen to law enforcement in more conservative cities that might be willing to work with the feds, kind of in contrast to SB1, which makes California a sanctuary state? And I know he's been on your program before. The mayor of El Cajon, Bill Wells, came out
Yes.
and did a really moving take on how he wants to help. And this has become a huge problem. The open borders have become a huge problem for his city. And he wants to be able to have his members of law enforcement, there's local police, help with the feds to turn over illegal immigrants when they get out of jail. I mean, it seems reasonable to most people. And this is what California voted on. But Gavin Newsom and Rob Bonta doubled down on stupid, and now Mayor Wells is worried that they're going to start coming after these officers if they dare cooperate with the federal government. And that's got to be a real concern, for police officers who already have so many people standing against them and shouting about defund the police. You don't want the governor and the attorney general coming after you.
It's
It's
amazing, but and for what? Coming after you, but protecting your community.
right
But
for
that's
following
what
your
they
oath
would
of,
be doing,
yeah,
right? Which
right.
is making sure that a violent criminal, a danger to the community, is connected with the federal the part of the federal government that's responsible for enforcing that part
Hmm.
of federal law, the
Hmm.
immigration aspect, so that they can be removed from the country and no longer be a threat and a danger to their community. And they're the ones. I mean, it's just such an amazingly perfect example of what we say the whole time, which is that, particularly here in California, they've just turned everything on its head. They've
Yeah.
inverted morality. You get rewarded for doing the wrong thing and punished for doing the right thing.
And when Gavin Newsom has 2 years to finish his term as governor, and we know he's got ambitions aside from just being the governor of California, wouldn't you want the track record to say, "Look, we were suffering. Here's what I've been able to do," so that you can cobble together a case to the whole country, especially when your voters have just passed Prop 36,
Mhm.
when voters in San Francisco and in Oakland and in Los Angeles made big changes in the way that their cities are going to be led, in the way that their law enforcement is gonna be led. This is the will of the voters of California. This isn't just a group of conservative commentators, Steve, who are saying that Gavin Newsom's on the wrong path. He literally, when I say he doubles down on stupid, he's not listening. And I
Yeah.
think that this is a really short-sighted thing to try to get national attention in going after Trump. But I think he needs to figure out how to start working with law enforcement. And sure, maybe he wants to stand and say, we don't want people going door to door getting deported. Maybe he wants to take a stand on that. But if you have people who are coming here and committing crimes and getting out of jail, let local law enforcement cooperate with the federal government and return them to their country of origin. There's
Yes.
nobody, I think, in California that would really disagree with that. It seems
It's
sensible.
I know, it's unbelievable, but yet you've got I mean, I wanna get to the counterexamples in a second of what these cities are doing, because San Diego is now making a move. We had LA the other week, now it's San Diego,
Mhm.
and that's where El Cajon is, the Bill,
Right.
is it Wells who you're talking about? Yeah,
Was, uh-huh.
that's right. But just on this point of the cooperation and going, and is that phrase going door to door. So that's a very vivid phrase, and
Sure.
it's used by the, immigration activists to say you don't want that. Well, their actions lead to people, the law enforcement going door to door. Why? Because if you don't cooperate with ICE and you have a violent criminal that is being detained and then released into the community, where are they going to go? Most likely back
Home.
to a immigrant neighborhood.
Mhm.
And so then ICE, if it wants to find them, then it really does have to go door to door to find them.
I'm so glad you make that point.
Instead of just dealing with it at the in the courthouse or wherever, like where you could just do it in a way. So it's just it's again, it's the opposite of what they say.
And I'm really glad that you made that point because it is so much safer for everybody, law enforcement, the public, the person themselves, if they're turned over in a courthouse with police there from one custody to another for deportation. It is fast, it is easy, it is safe. But as you mentioned, if you don't have the cooperation and they're being forced to let these guys into the community, then they really are having to go through immigrant neighborhoods. And it creates a situation where people can run, the public can get hurt. I mean, this is
It's
it
so
doesn't make
stupid.
sense.
But it's a yet another example of, I mean, I say it all the time, when we talk about the multiracial working class coalition that Trump has built, going back to our conversation about the MAGA movement and so on. Yes, Republican Party now, multiracial working class coalition. What's that leave? Where's that leave the Democrats? I
Mhm.
sometimes put it like this: the party of the rich, white, and woke. And the people who are saying all this stuff often are these wealthy, privileged, white liberals, left wing, extreme left wing people, activists, who just say all this. It's just like on climate, they say these things for to make themselves feel morally superior and virtuous, but they have no understanding of what actually happens in the real
Yeah.
world, and that always, 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 always the people that are hurt the most are the exact people that they claim to be supporting and defending and protecting. It's so true every single time, and I think people are waking up to it, that all this crap that these people spout, this
I
this
think people
ideology,
want safe communities. And I think you're right when you talk about this white, liberal, leftist, woke class. We all know they don't have an idea about what the inner cities, what these immigrant communities are facing because they have their walls and they have their security gates and they are not touched by this. But when you see the people who are really suffering or the kids who are overdosing on fentanyl or all of the stuff that comes with an open border,
Mm.
um, it you understand why there has been a shift and why this support. I mean, I couldn't believe it because President Trump's always been talking about this issue of immigration, but it certainly wasn't as popular. People would make fun of the notion. You remember the build the wall stuff in
Yes,
2016.
yes.
Now, the recent polling that I saw says that 65% of the country supports the deportation of these criminals out of the country. And I think the number is even higher when you get into certain demographics and certain classes. It is absolutely surprising, and even with Latino voters, this
Mhm.
is above 50% in support because their communities are the ones, as you mentioned, that are being
Yes.
impacted by these people who are coming in and preying on innocents, going to jail, getting right back, and they don't ever face the consequences of their trip into
Yeah.
this country
The
illegally.
the left, I mean, you mentioned it earlier in the context of Newsom and Bonto, the way they're handling the election result. They're just so out of touch. They really
Mhm.
are. They are completely out of touch. On the specifics in terms of, the mayor of El Cajon, that's near San Diego, as I mentioned. San Diego, did they vote, or they're proposing something that is the most extreme version of sanctuary policy?
Yeah, they're getting ready to vote on it. I don't believe that they did it yet, but it's very much in line with what's happening in LA, which did go through last week. The LA City Council voted to become a sanctuary city, even though I think most of us thought LA already was a sanctuary city. I
Right.
follow all this stuff. I live there. I thought for sure we already were. No, there was a special order given by Eric Garcetti, and LA made it official. San Diego's following suit. And all of this, again, is just showboating, and it is showboating because we are already a sanctuary state. There is nothing that is going to give you more protection than what's already in place as a sanctuary state in California. So, while yes, it's extreme, it is really kind of silly and a waste again of taxpayer money when there are real problems in San Diego, when there are real problems in Los Angeles that need to be dealt with. And we don't need the city council sitting around just taking these ridiculous votes on things that are already protected in California. But again, they're out of touch with the voters. This is why Trump won. This is why a lot of good candidates in California were able to get into the assembly and into the Senate because
Mm.
the Democrats, I think, have really lost touch here, and I'm curious to know if we'll see this in the upcoming local elections for both of these cities, if it's gonna be a payoff, if there'll be a payoff for people to maybe sneak someone in who's maybe a little more moderate. Doesn't even have to be a Republican, just a Democrat who
Mhm.
might be a little bit more sane and rational and actually wants to focus on problem solving.
Team sanity, that's what I often call it.
Can you imagine?
Like, we'll see, but it's just a very, very striking how little they've learned. And And as you say, this whole kind of Trump proof in California thing, and that's not what people in California, the it's as all these problems. I mean, another perfect example. You just had Newsom at the was it end of last week? He goes to the border and
Mhm.
does a photo op at the wall, which he's against, but he's standing there. Um, and starts going on about how Trump's immigration policies is going to be a big tax, going to the biggest tax increase in
Yeah.
history for California. It's going to hurt our farmers. I mean, what planet is he on? We already have the highest taxes in the country thanks to him and his Democrat colleagues. Our farming industry is being crippled by their policies, and he's standing there. It's and saying, "Oh, I'm really worried now about food prices and taxes in our farming industry," when they're the ones that have completely messed all of that up
Yeah,
more than
and think
any other
about it.
state.
And continue to do it with this new gas hike that's gonna come from
Yeah.
CARB, right? I mean, that all goes into the price of food. The environmental regulations to ship goods in and out of the state impacts the price of things that we pay. All of the environmental regulations, it's why our price of homes is so expensive. It's why the price of food is so expensive. The fact that we've got farmers who are struggling to get water when we're releasing water into the ocean to protect the Delta smelt. I mean, these are the things that are happening under Gavin Newsom's leadership that he could fix relatively easily. I mean, he could be a simple few swipes of a pen and
Yeah.
he could make it easier for people if he's worried about prices. But now, when Trump gets in and use tariffs, by the way, not as something that Trump really wants to implement, but as a negotiating tool to get Mexico and China and Canada to do their part. And Gavin Newsom is pulling his hair out about it because gas prices and because of food prices at the grocery store. He is phony, and people have to be seeing through it. They have to see through it.
Yeah, and as if they don't realize that we pay the highest prices for utilities, that we have the highest taxes already, and he's done nothing about it, and now he suddenly really cares about it because it's a way to attack Trump. It's so completely ridiculous.
It's insulting. And, Trump hasn't been president for the last 4 years. Our grocery prices have never been higher. Where was Gavin Newsom 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Where was he 6 months ago? And the answer is he doesn't care if we're suffering unless he can use our suffering for his political advantage.
I mean, that's basically that's right, and so this whole, I don't know, I don't even think it's gonna work in its own terms because, as you say, people can see through it. So obviously, the purpose of it is to help his own presidential ambitions, but I don't think it's even going to do that.
I think he's a laughing stock right now in the rest of the country. I mean, think about this, Steve. Yeah, he survived the recall attempt against him, but
Yeah.
I don't think that he would have if Larry Elder had been in the race for more than 6 weeks. I think that there could have been more work done if Larry had been in a little bit longer. Um, he is already a laughing stock in the country, and you come to California and you look at his popularity numbers, he survived a recall, but don't forget, there were 2 recalls triggered against him, and his popularity numbers, even in the state of California where everybody should love him, are quite low. So I don't think he should think that he is going to be coronated as the next candidate for the Democrat Party. I
Yeah.
think he's going to be surprised at the amount of work he's going to have to do to get there.
And have you heard talk? There's another recall in the works. Have you been hearing about this?
I have for the another recall against Gavin Newsom.
Yes.
As much as I will support it because anything that sticks it to Gavin is great, but we do have 2 years left. I would love to see the grassroots get behind a candidate that would get behind somebody who could really use the help and the energy to make California great and to help focus a vision on the future rather than the next 2 years of Newsom. How do you feel about the recall? Do you think I mean, is it worth it?
Much as I just feel, you know, you could say yes, he deserves to be. I mean,
Of course.
the record is completely appalling. But, we'll see. I don't know. I think it's just hard to tell whether the energy will be there for it. I think that's the
Right.
you know,
And I
um
think if they do try to do a 3rd recall, they better be sure that they can win it this time around, because otherwise, then he might actually be able to paint himself as a victim of the people coming after him, and I am not in any position to wanna help Gavin Newsom further his career in any way using anything that we could have prevented. So, I think if we're gonna do it, we better make sure that all hands are on deck and we've got someone great who could slide in as a recall candidate that might actually threaten his position.
Okay, well, we'll see. We have to, what do we say? We'll keep an eye on it. We'll follow it. That's what,
We follow it.
we'll see what happens. Um, Jen, is this the I think am I gonna see you again before the holidays? I'm not sure. I can't remember. We got probably another
I
couple of
hope
weeks.
so.
What are you planning to do? How does it all look for you?
The holidays?
Yeah, what do you
Well, I actually will, work all the way up until, the Friday before, so I'll be around the next couple of weeks, and then Christmas Eve, I do lots of cooking. Christmas morning, we go to my mom's house, that's always been our family's tradition, and then back to my house for Christmas Day. So, I will be at home. I will probably need a huge nap come December 26th because I do a lot of work,
It's
but
hard
it's
work, I
worth it.
know.
It's a lot of fun. Are you traveling for the holidays?
Yeah, we always go back to England because, family is there. So we'll be there for a couple of we'll be off for a couple of weeks. We're in England. I'm doing the cooking this year for Christmas, and my wife's got 2
I love
sisters.
it.
It's quite a big family. On our side, it's pretty small, so there'll be a lot of people around, lots of cousins. It'll be fun in the English countryside. Very nice.
Ugh, okay, come on, that sounds like a Hallmark movie. Where do I have a room? Can I check in to the Hilton estate?
Yeah, come to the Hilton. It'll be fine.
What's your specialty? What do you make for the holidays?
Oh,
What's
just the traditional I like just the very English Christmas dinner, they call it, the it's like Thanksgiving dinner here, so it's
turkey?
turkey
Yeah,
and all of that, yeah.
love it. Well, yeah, we will be probably together maybe one more time before then, and you'll be on the show,
Okay, very
hopefully.
good.
So
By the way, the one thing that is very English, I mean, remember, I'm Hungarian, so this is foreign to me anyway. My parents are here,
yes.
so I learned all this, but, growing up in England, the one thing that I think Americans find very weird, which is this thing that you do not you actually do it with you can do it anytime for like roast chicken or whatever, as well as
Uh-huh.
turkey on the holidays, but you has to be there for the holidays, which is one of the sides is bread sauce. Have you heard of bread sauce?
I haven't, but I get
Okay,
nervous because some
I
things
know.
that are bread are not really bread. What is bread sauce?
It's very weird. It's actually delicious, but it's like when you describe, you think, "Are you kidding? That sounds so kind of gross and unappetizing." It's basically bread cooked with milk and spices and onion, but it ends up being this sort of gloopy thing
Oh.
that
Okay, so it
that
doesn't have, like, brains or gizzards in it, right?
no, 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 it's bread. It's actual
It
bread. It's like it
because,
but
they tricked chubby girl like me with sweetbreads. That's brains,
oh,
okay?
yes,
That
that's
is
bread. No,
not
that's terrible. That's terrible. No, it's definitely
that's
not that.
gross.
No, you
Well,
wouldn't
you
be
know
doing
that
that.
I am Eastern European as well, so I'm Czech, and so one of
Yeah.
our big things that we do every year is we bake my grandmother's kolaczki recipe, which is always really fun, and my
Mhm.
cousin will come and help me do that. And every once in a while, if we get ambitious, we make hoska, which is a bread with like nuts and raisins inside of it. That was very traditional
Very
for my
good.
grandmother.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have a little bit of our own, cultural stuff as well. It sounds maybe a little better than the goopy bread sauce news.
I know, and the other good thing about that is that in Hungary, same with I don't know, in Hungary, you do the main thing is Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day,
Yeah,
and so that works really well because my mom and my stepdad, who's also Hungarian, they're not far from where my wife's family are in Sussex in England, and so we have 2 days in a row, so we go there for Christmas Eve and then my wife's family for Christmas Day, so it all works out very nicely.
but well, Merry Christmas. I hope you have a great one. It sounds fantastic to be in the countryside. That's amazing.
It is. It's very beautiful. All right. So meanwhile, we still have to, live in Gavin Newsom's California and struggle
We
through,
do.
but we will be there fighting every step of the way. It's very interesting. One last thing I just want to say, because sometimes you post these things. I can't remember what and when I'm thinking about what I'm posting on X, sometimes I'm sharing information or retweeting something or some video or something I've done or whatever. And every now and again, it's something you read something and you feel incredibly strongly and just sort of, rant kind of, just express a thought, and you never know what gets picked up. I had a very strong reaction to some I don't know, I was reading about something about, moderate whether the Democrats are gonna be more moderate, whatever, and I had this very clear, point of view, which is no, everything that's wrong in California is caused by Democrats. There's no
Yeah.
one else to blame. They've been in power for, like, nearly 20 years, so there is no solution to any of it that involves Democrats. Basically, the only solution is vote Republican. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what we and I got a kind of whoosh of strong reaction to that. So I think let's take that into the new year and fight very hard to save
Feel
California.
optimistic. Even for our state, by the way, I think the wind is at our back and we are at a very important moment where if we push in the right direction, I think we're gonna be okay. I haven't felt this optimistic about
I agree with
California in
that.
a long time.
Totally agree. All right, very good. Well, we'll do some kind of New Year's resolutions and New Year plans, and it's all going to be very good. Thank you, Jen. Great to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
All right, so I just want to talk a little bit more about my weekend in Florida and at Mar-a-Lago because it was so fun. And we had a conversation earlier, of course, with Jen Horn about the political aspect of it and what that all meant. But I just had a really fun time, I have to tell you. Um, and I know that you may think, well, you're constantly hanging, you're at Fox News and you're constantly meeting famous people and so on. And I'm not really. And we're in California. A lot of obviously Fox is based on the East Coast, and if you're there with Fox in New York, obviously a lot of big names come through and so on. But that doesn't happen so much for me. So for me, it's a real thrill actually to be there and place like this, a big event like this where lots of people are there. And I was actually at Mar-a-Lago too. I was there with some friends for dinner the night before the big Turning Point event, and there, this is on a Friday night, I believe. We're having dinner, and guess who I saw? And I went up to and had a great conversation with someone I'd never met, but an absolute legend, like the word legend, designed for someone like this. Sly Stallone, amazing. He was so gracious. We had a great conversation. We actually talked about California because he's obviously someone who lived here and he's moved out, like so many people have. And I always say, I don't blame anyone. You've got to make your decisions. But I said, look, here's the thing. Let's make California so great that you move back. And he was into that. He was so great. It was a real treat. Imagine for me, growing up in England and watching Rocky and all those movies, and the fact that I get to meet him is just absolutely unbelievable. So that was a thrill. Another real thrill was to meet someone. This is actually I met her on Saturday night at the Turning Point event itself. We were just seated on next door tables, and then we're in one of the shuttle buses taking you to and from the event, and we had a really great conversation, and I loved her so much. Riley Gaines, who is fantastic. Of course, we know Riley from her amazing stand on the extremism that you've seen around gender and sports. She's been such an amazing, strong voice for that, and I think has made a huge difference. She was recognized actually with an award for what she did. But she's just a great person. We just had a really good connection. Really enjoyed meeting Riley, and again, it was a thrill for me to meet someone who I really admire. And the whole night was like that, it's just meeting all this. Why when I said talking to Jen earlier, saying it was such a warm and fun event, it really was. Um, and just but Don Jr. was there, and Kash Patel, and Bobby Kennedy, Dr. Oz, all these all these great people, um, who are some part of the incoming administration, others not. Stephen Miller was there. He made a great speech, fired everyone up. It was a really amazing weekend. And Mar-a-Lago, by the way, is a very beautiful and special place. Um, if there's any way you can find a way to go there, I know there are lots of events that happen there. Um, of course, it's tough. It's on the East Coast. But if there is a way you can find to get there, I think it's well worth it. It's a truly special place. A historic building, very beautiful, beautifully restored, and it has a real magic to it. Its location and the grandeur. It's a historic building, um, and a wonderful place to be, and very inspiring. So all in all, it was a very special weekend. I hope you don't mind indulging me in sharing some of the highlights with you, but it really meant a lot to me. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening to this week's episode and for supporting our show. Tell everyone about the Steve Hilton Show. Make sure you follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you back here next week for our next episode.